Trust. It's never fun to talk about them because then we're talking about death, right? But we're going to get into the weeds here. I'm Addie Jacobs with Addie Jacobs Real Estate, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
You have difficult names. So Nelly Parsi,
Chantal Desters,
and we're with Desters and Parsi. So.
All right. So first and foremost, how did you guys even start your firm and like take us from like day one, let's say? Like how did it like?
It started out as a beautiful friendship in law school. I always kind of knew I wanted to be out on my own, not work for a firm. You get more flexibility. Sure. You could be a mom, all those different things. And, I didn't know what I wanted to go into. So I was talking about, I was doing some criminal law. Then I was like, oh, let's do entertainment law. And then Chantal actually was like, no, we need to go into estate planning. Mm-hmm. I was like, really? So she kind of walked me through it. And she was working for a firm at the time. So I was like, hey, we passed the bar together. We studied together. We're in it, knee deep, supporting each other. So I was like, listen, why don't we just right off the bat start our firm? Yeah. And everybody said we were crazy.
Crazy? That would be crazy.
Yeah.
Because it's like a marriage.
Yeah. And they said, your friendship is going to, go to hell. Everything, don't do it. So I kind of started planning everything, setting up the business while she was still working. Okay. So I was like, okay, put in your notice, move over. And, and that's really how it happened. And it's been the greatest decision, I would say.
I think so.
And how many years?
12?
Yep.
Holy cow.
Sometimes I go to 13. I don't know why.
That's my favorite number.
Yeah,
so
mine too. I think 7 and 13. So maybe that's why I feel like it's been 13.
Yeah.
I think because we're in 2025 now, something like correlate. Yeah. But 12 years.
Okay, so what do you guys exactly, I know we say a trust, but let's talk a little bit about that. Like what does that entail? What do you do if somebody's like, because I always feel like, God, you need a trust and you need a will. Like so many people don't have one.
So our firm, in general, our firm focuses on estate planning, probate, which we could get into, why you need a trust, business formations, and then trust administration. So I handle the probates, Nelly handles the trust administration, the business formations, and then as far as estate planning, we break that up amongst, the both of us. But estate planning in general is very much so comprehensive planning. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't realize that there are documents aside from a trust. So when we say you need an estate plan, what we're generally talking about is a trust, a will, a power of attorney, mm-hmm. a healthcare directive, and then if you have minor children, mm-hmm. Guardianship designation.
Right.
So we can go into those. And
well, a lot of what we do is having to be educational and talk about it because movies have really ruined this industry mm-hmm. for us because people think a will is sufficient mm-hmm. and it's not. A will really doesn't do anything for you. So in this case, that's why we talk about why you need a living trust, mm-hmm. especially here in California.
Mm-hmm. And it just seems like nobody, including my husband over there, likes to talk about this stuff. And I don't know why I like to talk about it because I'm like, because shit happens and people die. Yeah. Like that's what happens. And then nobody wants to fight over things. Like, why don't people just...
I absolutely hate talking about death. She knows this. And I handle probates and when people are dying and I am not good with death at all. But in the alternative, so with a trust, for example, because I deal with probates and people lose loved ones, and sometimes they lose people who aren't their loved ones, but they want what's left and they want what that person leaves behind. So you see the worst. I mean, death and money. It's you see a whole new whole new person. You see different family dynamics. You see things where you think someone, the family might think someone was leaving behind money, but then they had debt or vice versa. Mm-hmm. So when you see that and you experience that, it has become so important for her and I. If you just set up a trust, you assure that whomever is left behind, whether it's a spouse, a friend, a partner, a neighbor that you want to leave it to, you assure you've set that up for them so that people aren't scrambling and going through the probate process, which is incredibly timely and expensive.
Mm-hmm. So we should talk about that.
Yes, absolutely.
It's nasty.
Yes, so from seeing the worst of situations, and it's not necessarily the worst of people, but when, like, I don't like death, right? So when there's a death and someone's emotional and having to already deal with their emotions of what's taking place, and sometimes these are parents who now become single parents or just whatever it is, that in itself is hard to like comprehend. Then when you're left with, well, wait a minute, I can't access this account or I can't sell this house. What do you mean? And, you know, it's a whole nother layer of stress. So,
well, let's kind of go into that.
Yeah.
Then what happens? Like,
yeah, and I will just say, you know, here, if you don't plan, you will be punished. And that's the biggest thing. And I, you know, not being raised in the U.S., coming from Europe, very different dynamic there. You know, if somebody dies, you're taking the time to mourn. It's not that difficult to move over assets. Versus here, if you don't do it, like I said, you will have, you know, it's going to be a headache at a time where you just want to mourn your loved one or deal with the grief that you're dealing with. You have deadlines you have to meet. There's notices that need to be sent out. There's different processes you need to go through, work with an attorney. So, you know, that's what Chantal does, you know, with the probate process. She's like, I have bad news for you. We have to go through the court. It's not just going to be automatically released to you. You know, we have to go through this very difficult, you know, court process.
Yeah. So, like, one of the biggest takeaways is if you own real property in California, you have to have a living trust. Okay, you have to. We say this over and over, and it could sound repetitive, but it is the truth. The only avenue to retitle an asset to avoid probate is through a trust. It is not a will. So, again, oftentimes someone comes to us and they're like, well, you know, my dad had a will. Here's the will. It's leaving everything to me. And then we pull title to the property. We're like, well, he did have a will and it's leaving everything to you. Correct. But the property is in his name. Okay. And that means we have to go through probate with the will, same cost, same time. When you have a trust, we actually re-record the property deed with the county where it's located and we transfer it to the trust. So then what happens is if you pass away, your loved ones, well, first of all, it's private. It does not go through the probate court process at all. So you don't like open the door to, you know, the public and the neighbor and the cousin, which happens all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And the 10th cousin and the stepchild.
They know what's going on.
Yes, they know, they get involved. It gives them kind of like a platform to delay things, right? So when you set up a trust, you have this private document, and essentially what it is doing is distributing your assets per your wishes outside of the probate process. And the beauty of it is that you amend it throughout your lifetime if you want to. It's revocable. You can change your mind every week if you wanted to. You can add assets, you can remove assets, you could do all of that.
Yeah, for a fee.
Yes, for a fee. Yeah. Everything's for everything.
I just got one.
No. So you know, everything comes at a cost. However, I will say the fee is minimal compared to if you end up in probate court.
No kidding. Let's talk a little bit about that. So when you're talking probate, how does that work, and what are the costs, and how does that?
Yes, it's a good
question. Because I think people need to know that.
Yes. Yeah. So, and I'll give hypotheticals because that's kind of how our brains work on like how bad it actually is, right? So, as I mentioned, if someone passes away, so the way it works in California, if you pass away with an asset in your own name, that is right now the marker is $185,500. So it has to be that amount, has to be in your own name. This includes bank accounts. So if you had a bank account for $185,500 and it didn't have a joint owner on it and it had no beneficiaries, that's going through probate, okay? So it's not just real property.
Okay.
So what happens is they'll call us and they'll say, hey, I can't access this bank account or I can't sell this house.
Like one of the people who are left with it.
Like a family member or a spouse or, you know, it could be whoever thinks, a child, whatever. And they'll say, why can't I help us? The bank is saying we need court papers, or the realtor's saying we need court papers. And they do. So what we do is we step in and we petition the court. It's a petition for probate, either with a will or without. And we're essentially asking the court, can Sam serve as the administrator of their dad's estate, okay? And if the court approves that, then the court is giving authority for Sam to access bank accounts, sell the property. But you know, I'm simplifying it right now because in the process of this, There's so much in regards to creditors. Who are the beneficiaries? There are heir companies out there that notify like these extended family members that you might be an heir, and then, you're bombarded with, calls.
All these people.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
And then with fees, people hate the fact that it's inclusive of debt. And this is just how it works. So we get a statutory percentage of the total value of the estate. So for example, we have a probate right now that is in LA, and the house was $780,000 is what it was appraised at from the court appointed appraiser. After paying off the mortgage, they're getting about $275,000. But before they get that, the statutory fees are close to $18,000 for the attorney.
Right,
okay.
Right.
Then whomever is serving as the administrator by law is entitled to matching. So here you have $36,000.
Just $40,000 right there.
Yeah.
Just for not doing this.
Yes.
And all the headache. And how long does that take?
A simple one takes a year, at least.
Crazy.
Because we have the court calendar that's full. Then we have things that cause delays.
Yeah.
Then you have people who will come in and contest things, and so you just subject this estate to such a nightmare, and it sucks because they come to us and then they're like,
it is why we see so many house abandoned.
Yes.
There's no work
Yes.
on it because it's probate or
yes.
Yeah, it's just like kids are fighting.
Yes.
Like the ones down by our street. Like, how we walk every single night, and hot tea, walk around the walks,
nice.
TV. And there's a couple that are just boarded up, and I'm like, oh, I bet the family's just like, something happened.
Yeah.
And nobody's gonna, like, I don't know.
Well, and
It's
a lot
gotta
of
be-
times the fees associated too. Granted, if you sell it, but some people have so many like mortgages on
sure.
that they're
Sure.
not going to cover the statutory
Sure.
fees.
I
They're
didn't even think of that.
these houses go in foreclosure.
Yeah.
It's really unfortunate.
And we always say, you're getting peace of mind. That's what you're hiring us for.
Sure.
Because your children should not have to fight or go on, a scramble figuring out what's going on.
Yeah.
What am I going to get? What are you going to get? And just calling us and, dealing with, we have to explain this whole process to them. It's a lot for somebody that just wants to mourn and just wants to be sad and not have to deal with all of this.
And start fighting over
And start
money,
fighting.
really.
And people fight.
Oh,
and
yeah.
we see it,
Money in there.
That's always, it
Yeah.
changes people. And then you have different factors. You could have, people with, substance abuse problems or, special needs or, where it's they need help. You don't want to just give them money. And that's where the trust is such a good tool because you dictate. You say, I have a child, for example, with special needs, and I want to make sure that, they're taken care of this way and that this is being paid for. Or if I were to die before my children are 21 and there's substance abuse problems, because we don't know how people will deal with dealing with loss. And it's like, well, then freeze their inheritance. They're not going to get anything. Incentives you could give them via the trust and somewhat we say control beyond the grave as parents because we don't know what we're leaving behind at such a sensitive time. Avoiding the probate process is really the peace of mind that you owe to your family after spending a lifetime of building, your assets, and we always want to protect our families, and this is another way to do so.
Yeah, for such a inexpensive when you look at the whole situation. So when should somebody get this done in their life?
Absolutely when you own real property, but I also think, let's say you don't own real property and you have minor children, but you have assets because. Yes, can you essentially name your child as the beneficiary of your retirements, your bank accounts, your life insurance? Sure. But if your child's a minor, they're going to get it at 18, right? Whereas if you designate the trust, let's say you don't own a home, but you designate the trust as the beneficiary of your accounts, then as Nelly just mentioned, you put provisions in there. You could say 25% at 25. Then another 25% at 30, and so on. And we have clients that do such various things depending on each child too.
Yeah.
There's drastic different personalities.
Yeah. They could
drastically different.
And one weekend in Vegas, you know what I mean?
Well, and that's another thing. Like in our trust, depending on the age of the child and the client, we'll put substance abuse provisions in there. So
they get drug tested.
Well, if the trustee, the acting person in charge after the main person passes away, will put provisions in there that gives them the right to withhold a distribution of their inheritance if they have any type of substance abuse. And so there's, depending again on the client, we'll put provisions. If they end up in jail or if they have substance abuse for a year. So there's so much that can be done with a trust that you can't do otherwise.
And we could also protect your children. Everybody's looking for asset protection, right? And within the trust, you could say things like, for example, at a time, somebody's receiving their inheritance, maybe they're being sued, they're going through a divorce. It's not a good time for them to receive all this cash or money, right? So we can put little loopholes in their provisions, making sure that their inheritance stays safe. So those are little things, people don't think about it until it's too late, and then there's not much we could do about it at that point. So, the sooner you can get it done, the better. Because with every attorney drafts their trust differently. The way her and I draft it, we make sure that you don't have to call us. People think they have to call us if they buy a new house, sell the house. You don't have to call us for those things. It's really more so, has there been a death, divorce? Do you want to remove a beneficiary? Like big life changes where they need to come in and make change, or if there's changes in the law. But, get it done sooner than later, because who knows what happens tomorrow, right? And then again, you have that peace of mind.
Yeah, and then what happens, because I know when that could be a whole nother segment, but when people are different countries, because I had no idea his would just drop, no, and he'd have to get it done here, from Canada. That was interesting because his attorney was like, oh no, the moment he's here, this one is not valid, and then you got to do a new one.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, if you are here in California, you have assets here, you have to make sure you have a proper estate plan set up for California, right?
Especially California.
California, yes, exactly.
Welcome.
Yes.
It's like that love-hate.
It's in real estate.
It's litigious, but it's paradise.
I know.
We are one of the most litigious states, which is also why, kind of going to the next thing, we recommend people having asset protection, because a trust avoids probate most of the time. It's not the asset protection tool that you're looking for. Versus, if you have investment property, if there's things you want to do, then we recommend LLCs, if you have businesses, corporation, things like that. But that will give you kind of the level of, asset protection that you're looking for. And that's something we do as well, where we kind of, again, create a comprehensive plan. We look at everything you have. If you have investment properties, we'll always recommend an LLC, and then we'll tie that back to your trust to really give you that added peace of mind.
So why a will, and then why also a trust? So talk to us.
Very good question.
People are going to be like, well, I have the will.
Yes, and I know I mentioned the comprehensive estate plan, a trust, a will. So when you have a trust, it's drastically different. It's called a pour-over will, okay? And like the name, pour over, what it essentially is doing is it's working as a catch-all document. So what it says is, for example, let's say we create a trust for you and we transfer all your assets, and then you inherit a property, a parent passes away, and you inherit a property, you inherit it in your name, and you just completely forget to tie it to your trust because you inherited it, life happens, it's been 10 years, and you die. You have now died with an asset outside of the trust. So now we go back to that $185,500 marker, okay? And this happens with bank accounts too. What that will essentially is saying, and same probate, same fee, same time, same process, everything, but it's telling the courts, pour over the asset that was left behind and let the terms of the trust control. So for example, if you don't have a will and you go through probate, they decide who inherits through the intestacy laws. So it's kind of like the family tree. You have parents, siblings, predeceased children, and who's next in line to inherit. When you have a will, a pour-over will or a regular will, you've already designated who you want to inherit. You just have to go through probate.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so let's say, client disinherits one child, but their second child gets everything. If you have that pour-over will, it's going to assure through the probate process that one child remains disinherited and the other child receives everything. If you had neither and you wanted a child to be disinherited, both are going to get it 50-50. So the pour-over will should never come into play. It is really just your catch-all that if in probate, it tells the courts the trust terms are dictating this asset or assets that are in probate. Whereas a pour-over will versus just like a will, the difference is it's also in probate there's just no trust tied to it.
Got it.
So
okay. Yeah,
it's kind of like our catch-all. We try to,
Yeah.
but again, you don't want it to come into play because then we're in probate with it, which we are all the time.
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
No, I'm sure you are.
People forget a bank account. One big thing, Nelly does all our business formations for investment properties.
Okay.
One big thing that we've noticed is people forgetting to tie investment companies, whether it's an LLC, a corporation, let's say you own a dental practice, whatever it is, any business, anything that's considered a business, they do not tie it to their trust for whatever reason. We've seen that a lot of our clients will go have their formations done by a CPA, for example.
Uh-huh.
And then the formalities of that entity aren't done properly and they're never tied to the trust. So then they have a trust and they're like, I have a trust, the house is in trust, the bank accounts are in trust,
Not the
but
business.
this entity isn't in trust.
Uh-huh.
And now that entity.
So that has to go to probate.
Yeah.
Crazy.
We had a probate a couple years ago. Really, they're all sad situations.
Yeah,
Some
no
just
kidding.
happen to be,
Worse.
yes. So, they're all sad though, especially to the person. But gosh, years ago around Thanksgiving, I don't know if you guys ever, because you were involved it with me, but I don't know if you heard Addie, but there was a young boy in his 20s. He crashed a McLaren in Rancho Santa Fe into a semi-truck.
Okay.
And and he was in his 20s, so he didn't technically, he didn't own a house and things like that, but he came from a family of wealth. And what had happened is his dad had so many different entities and apartments in Ohio and California, everywhere, that he had given a percentage of each entity to his children. Well, cumulatively, because there was so many assets in these different entities and so many apartments, it far exceeded the 185.
Yeah.
So he was like, it was horrific because rightfully so, the dad had to go through this and the mom, but they didn't want to deal with me because they didn't want to talk about it, because every time they did, they were angry, they were mourning. They were very angry. And it's like, you understand it, right? But yet they had so much tied up with taxes on these entities. So we had to go through a probate for a bunch of different percentages of these entities because it was never put in trust.
So how much did that cost them?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. And aside from that, truly, I dealt directly with the dad on this. The mom was like, she could not do anything. But even the dad was just constantly angry. And again, I get it. I would be the same. And he was like, I don't want to deal with it. You deal with it. And yes, to a certain extent, but you're the administrator. I need a signature. I need this info. And it's like one of those things that.
Meanwhile, and their kids died.
This is,
tragically.
Yeah.
My husband always says, are you an attorney or are you a psychologist?
Yeah, no
because
kidding.
That's what we're dealing with. It's raw emotions. It's death. It doesn't get more hurtful than that, right? So that's what you're dealing with. And in the midst of it, it's like, hey, sign this paperwork for court. And that's what I mean. If you could avoid this, please try to avoid it for yourself and you.
So they didn't have a will, you're saying?
They didn't have trust. They didn't realize, which most people do, this is why we do these speaking engagements, that you can have an entity, but if those entities own real estate, that is just like Nelly does this, and she could talk about it. That's just for liability. An LLC is just liability. Yeah. That's not planning for death. They're two very separate things. So they didn't tie or know to have a trust tied to each LLC interest.
Wow, we could talk. We should do a whole nother segment on that.
Yeah.
That's a good one,
Yeah.
just about that.
Yeah,
because people
crazy.
own businesses and wrap
she does with it all the time.
Yeah, I bet. Interesting.
Yeah, it's really all it is you want to make sure it's assigned back to your trust. And good estate planning attorneys like ours, we could do that for you, right? Yeah. So that's the beauty also, because people call us, they want asset protection, and then they think the trust is that, and it's not, and then we talk about businesses, and that's where we come in, whether they already have businesses, we do a cleanup process where we look at everything. It's always hard for me when a CPA established it, because they miss so much that needs to be in there, right? Mm-hmm. So, but then that's what we do, come in, clean up, and then make sure we tie it all back together so that, from every angle, they're kind of taking care of it.
Yeah, so important.
And if you have a medical profession, or a legal profession in a business, the planning for that in terms of the trust and assigning the interest of the business is drastically different than it would from someone who maybe, I don't know, has a jewelry business or whatever it is, because a licensed professional has to be handled very different upon death than someone who's not a licensed professional.
Sure.
So it's just, there's so many different caveats and like, Nelly has done a lot of conservatorships for us. So like the power of attorney is a big
yeah,
one.
that's absolutely. So when we talk about all these documents, we could sit here and talk till
I
tomorrow
know.
about how important everything is. But
and we get like really like passionate about it, and I think everybody else is just like,
oh, see, and I love it.
Yeah.
Like I get all into like I don't know, and then I'm like, I'm not doing it right. Am I doing it right? Oh my God, your head spins. Yeah.
Like I say, for everything, there's a consequence if you don't plan for it, right? And there are times when it's just too late. When people call us, they're ready to hire us, they're ready to get going. We're like, there's absolutely nothing I can do for you at this point. And one of those biggest things is,
meaning like you're already in the weeds with.
Well, mental capacity is huge with the state planning. You need to make sure that the person you're working with has that capacity to be able to understand what it is we're doing, or because if not, it's just going to be disputed and thrown out the window, right? And there's 2 documents, a lot of these things like the trust, the will, they come into play, the guardianship after we've passed away. But then there's 2 documents that come into play while you're living, but you're suffering from some form of incapacity, right? Okay. So this is if, somebody would have a stroke, Alzheimer's, something where they lose that capacity. What we then do is we create the power of attorney, which everybody's heard of. Yep. Everybody knows. It's a very simple form. If you don't have it, you're going to be punished, really. So with this document, we'll say if something were to happen to me where I don't have incapacity, I want Chantal to step in and be my agent. It's simple as that. I've taken care of it. We're done. We've gotten calls. Husband fell off a ladder, doesn't have capacity. He's in a coma. I need a power of attorney. There's absolutely nothing I can do for you at this point. Now we have to go through court. Now we have to get the conservatorship, and it's again a very lengthy, costly.
Right?
Yeah, it's and
see why we did it.
Yes.
yes. You fall off that ladder.
You send him back to Canada.
I know, I'm like,
you're not my responsibility anymore. Like, shipping you back. I don't want to deal with the courts here.
Actually, I'll just go back to
Canada.
Useless.
But that's why these documents are important. If that person had bank accounts or assets, just title to them, and life happens, you need to access the bank accounts to make payments for bills, whatever. Maybe they're in the middle of signing a contract, maybe they're selling a house, whatever it is, somebody needs to step in your shoes and get things going, right? And that's why these documents are so important, because again, if you don't have it, same thing, we do, the healthcare directive is the second one. Again, you have to have mental capacity, and it's only while you're living. If you pass away, both your healthcare directive and your power of attorney goes out the window, right? And that's when the trust and the will and all that kicks in.
Okay.
So with the healthcare directive, again, designating a person, this is a little bit more, we always say this is a very sensitive document, because you're designating a person to make medical decisions on your behalf if you're unable to. So, a lot of times we see people like, this is my trustee, this is my power attorney, this is my executor, and then we get to that form and they're like, oh, I don't know if, this child is very sensitive, I don't want to put them in this, which all valid, and that's where it gives you that time to think, who could really make, a decision at a time where a doctor will come up to me and say, whether it's talking about pulling the plug, or, if we do the surgery, there's a 70% chance this will happen. Who could sit there and kind of make these decisions for me? But again, you have to have full mental capacity for us to even be able to do these documents for you.
Yeah. We had a client the other day. I laugh because, you think of like things as, you got to make light of situations sometimes, because they're not light situations at all. But the other night I had a client that wanted to go over, the questionnaire that we have them fill out, and we got to the healthcare directive part, and I was explaining the different options. Okay, so if you're a vegetable, if you're a vegetable in an irreversible, incurable state, and you don't have capacity.
What do you say, babe? Put a pillow over my head. He's like, just put a pillow over my head, like really hard.
It's tough, like the movies.
Let me go.
Let me go. But I was like, okay, so do you want the physician to say you're now in this state, and then you pick who you want to make that final decision? Another option is to prolong life. We have clients that are like, make every effort made. And this client, so I was explaining it to him, and he said, well, what if I want to be the one to decide? And
you're not.
And I was like, well, that would be really hard, because you'd be a vegetable in an incurable, irreversible,
so you can't do it.
No capacity. And he was like, oh. And
Yeah,
I'm
see
like,
a
you know,
cucumber,
so
sign
it's like,
something.
I don't think you can just like suddenly wake up and be like, pull the plug and then go back into this like vegetable state, you know? But I laugh about it because in the moment, you know, it's like, oh, but I think the reality of it is these are like tough combos for people to have. Like she knows I hate talking about this stuff like in my personal life, but I like helping people get through it in a way that doesn't feel so heavy for them because it's so important.
Yeah.
And it could be heavy right now, but it's going to be light later while everybody's alive and kicking, you know?
If you don't have it, I mean, you know, she's dealt with it with her mother-in-law. I dealt with it recently with my grandma. It's like they will ask you, where's your healthcare directive? And I will tell you in my own family situation, it's like, thank God we had it, because like when there's too many cooks in the kitchen and too many like opinionated Italians and like it's like you need a designated one. Otherwise,
and see, I saw it with my father because he got left as a vegetable pretty much when I was 19. So and he lived like that 16 years.
Oh man.
So it's kind of like he died twice. But like if nobody's in control, so I feel like I think that's why I'm so hyper like focused on it, because it can like wreck a family. It can like, you know, if everybody's like mourning, but they don't know what to do, and now somebody's left alive, which is even to me worse. than just passing. You know, so I think that's why, you know, you find people who are like, wow, like we have to figure this out.
Usually, sadly, like with probate too, the family members are people who have gone through terrible events are usually our best clients. Because they're like, I don't.
Well, it's logical. It's like
they're prepared.
They're prepared.
We're prepared.
You see the worst.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah, we had a client yesterday, and he's in an ongoing probate for his mom's estate, and we were doing his trust, and he's like, I just need to sign. I need to be done with this because I'm in a tied up probate for my mom, and I don't want to do that to my kids. He's a single dad. His kids are adults, but still, it doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't matter what age they are. You need to have it in place.
Absolutely.
Huh. All right. Woo! We'll slice that one up.
I told you.
I love it.
I don't know if it's still the same. Maybe it's dentists, but attorneys have always taken the chart for having the highest rate of like drinking, right? Substance abuse.
We have to take CLEs for that to make sure we don't go down that path.
Well, between that and criminal law, and then like divorces, and it's just like.
Heavy.
Like Nelly said, like you're not just an attorney, you're like a therapist. I think it's the same in real estate though.
Kidding. Oh yeah.
When you're selling homes for people who are going through a divorce or someone who's passed or even just the stress of purchasing a home, like therapy.
Yeah. And it's crazy because like I had a lady that got a hold of me and through a referral, and I don't even know the person who referred him, which was weird. It was in Northern California. And talk about a crazy situation. She owned 3 or 4 properties here in San Diego, like triplexes, and she was probably like maybe 70. And she called me one day and was like, I want to sell this property. And I was like, okay, so I'll meet you at your other house, because she said somebody's kind of living there, a handyman kind of thing. I'm like, okay, so I go into her house, and her husband's walking around, who's totally
that's
like,
her handyman.
No.
They have no capacity.
But she was like, maybe he's probably like a good 6'7" tall, walking around in like kind of diaper kind of things, and I'm like this, and I'm looking at her, and I'm like, where am I right now? And she's like, okay, I'll sign whatever. I want to just sell the one in Claremont. I'm like, okay. So she's like, go over there, and you can go over. There's a handyman, I think, kind of living there, and I'm like, okay. Couldn't get in. She's like, go ahead and call a locksmith. I'm like, no, you need to call a locksmith. I can't just change your locks. I end up going
break the window. It's no problem.
I go in, and it is mold from head to toe. Kids writing on walls. Broken windows. Pictures that have been cut out of family pictures with heads like missing. Like it's like
a horror movie.
Oh my God, I'm like this. Where the hell am I? Okay, so I call her and I'm like, so is a handyman living here? Like this is kind of a, I don't know this lady. And I don't want to say her name, but it's so we go through this thing. She's like, okay, I want to sell the house.
It's like a
hoarding house though, and I'm like, we gotta get your stuff out, or I can sell it as is. I can get an investor to come in here and wipe it out, whatever, do it. Okay, yeah, no, all right. And we talk for probably a month, and she's like, I'm gonna want to sell this one at some point, but my husband's really sick, and I don't know, and So then I can't get a hold of her. She ends up calling me at like 6 a.m, weird hours, drinker for sure, and she's like, I just got out of jail. And I go, what are you talking about? And she's like, I need you. I'm at a motel, and they thought. I'm like, who thought? And she said, the cops, I called for hospice because my husband was like, I couldn't get him off the couch. And I must have fell asleep. They came in and they arrested me. He was dead. And I'm like, what is going on?
God.
So they took her away because
they thought she killed him.
But she fell asleep and who knows what this whole situation went to shit. And next thing you know, she's like, can you go get me some clothes out of my other house? You can get through the window. I'm like, and you have a daughter who's like schizophrenia. I'm like, I'm not going into your house.
No.
Like, I'm your real estate agent. I am not your, like, I don't know you. You're not my friend. This is who I am. No problem. I don't hear from her for like a week. And I think we were talking, I'm like, I'm going to call like the cops to see if she's safe.
Yeah, if she's okay.
They called me back like 10, 15 minutes later. Found her dead.
I was going to say she
in a motel
dead.
in Point Loma.
Oh my God.
All went to probate.
Oh.
So the kids called me because I was like, I'm in the middle, I have like a contract.
Yeah.
They get a hold of me, I meet with them, and they said, yeah, she was like not doing well and she had been a drinker, so nobody got a hold of them. Now they have to go through probate for all these properties. And I'm probably she's probably sitting on, who knows?
Oh my God. Yeah, these are like, it's like the movies.
So what is the biggest amount that you saw that people just, like you said, there's like 185.5, then like, what goes on?
Yeah, but for probates, it's usually, especially in San Diego, if you own a home here, I don't care how much debt you have on it.
Yeah.
I mean, the real estate market, for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, it's like over $1 million, you know?
You can enjoy that.
So we've dealt with, our biggest ones have been in the millions, because if you put 2 properties, if you put, an investment.
But how much are they like right off the bat, just like losing?
Oh,
with
easily,
like fees and court
easily
fees.
over, like with these larger ones, 30 up. 30,000, 60 grand, because then you give matching to the administrator. I mean, there is a lot. And like, I guess some people can assume, well, if you have an estate worth millions, like 30,000 in the big picture. But the problem is the estate is worth millions, but like that's not the money you're pocketing because you're paying these debts. And then a lot of people realize, because once this becomes public, there's notice given to creditors.
Yeah.
So credit cards, people who have, people who've borrowed money.
Yeah.
And then like, so many times we have these clients and they're like, well, this came in the mail and this one, and they can file the creditor's claim with the probate court. They have a period to do that. Okay, so there's like no way of getting out of that. The claim is filed.
Yeah, all that's getting paid first.
We have a probate right now that's like kind of by Big Bear, and it's like not anything special, but the gentleman who owned it had been dead in there for 6 or 7 months.
Inside?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knew?
No, because he had 1 daughter and then 1 adopted daughter, and he didn't have relationships with them. So when he eventually was found, obviously there was hoarding, and then that is just hazmat team had to come in.
Oh,
and
sure.
So
my God.
Just terrible, right? And the police were able, because of like the laws, and to find that she was the daughter was the heir, and she's like, I'm the daughter, but we just haven't had a relationship in our whole lives.
Yeah.
So we go through probate. She's the administrator. Whatever this property is worth, she's going to get something from it. It's not worth that much at all. But then, as we're going through the probate, title gets pulled, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And it's like, okay, so here's the list of liens. One of the liens was a judgment from 2 years prior when he was alive, where the court ordered him for an exchange of X amount of dollars to sell the property to someone. So someone took him to court because they're based off of a promise. The court ordered this judgment that this other man is the purchaser of this property. Well,
he got it.
He never deposited the money after the judgment. Now, fast forward 2 years, he didn't act on the judgment, but there's this judgment on the property, so the property can't be sold. But now we're in a situation where there was a judgment, but the guy's dead now. And like, the one guy didn't perform, the other guy's dead. So,
Oh my God.
Yes. So, yeah. And then the amount of the judgment was way more than what a property, when someone dies 2 years later and was left in there for 7 months, the property's not worth that. So we had this like combative back and forth where this guy's like, hey, there's a I have a judgment. And I'm like, well, you didn't perform. You want the property, perform the amount the court ordered. But his argument was like, well, it's not worth that anymore. And I'm like, well, sorry to tell you, either if you want this property, you're going to give the estate what the judgment was, or you're not getting the property. So there was this back and forth. Things get really interesting. Not as interesting as your story. But,
oh, God. I was like, oh, man. What a bummer, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, we get it. It's like she got a call, and this guy was like, yeah, my neighbor, he doesn't have any family, but I found him dead in his car. He was there for 3 days. We're like, in Poway. We're like, oh my God, how does this happen?
Love that you're on my channel. Please subscribe. What's great for me too is I have a new selling guide, and it's going to help you navigate selling here in San Diego and helps me know who you are. So download that guide here on YouTube. I would love to help you.